Bill Landis here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Bill?
I'm good, Rich. How are you?
All right. So what do you know as you currently know it? You're chatting with me right now, Bill.
I mean, I guess about as much as you know. We're trying to gather information now as Ohio State sort of enters this investigation phase. We have no idea how long it's going to take. I think we all know the central question here is whether or not Urban knew about Zach Smith in 2015, and if he knew, if he went through the proper protocol. I heard you talking before you brought me on, and you mentioned that the Title IX language in Urban's contract. It seems fairly clear in his contract that if these allegations from Courtney Smith that Urban Meyer knew and that he didn't report, that he would be in violation of his contract. So that's kind of what we're waiting on now, to see whether or not Ohio State can find that out in the course of its investigation into Urban.
So who is it doing the investigating, Bill?
I'm assuming it's Ohio State's athletic department and its attorneys. It's an in-house investigation as far as we know. We have not heard anything about any outside resources being pulled in to help just yet. It's not to say it can't happen, but at the moment it seems like it's being handled in-house by Ohio State, the university athletic department, and then its legal team.
All right, and is there a deadline spurring action here in terms of the playing season that's right around the corner?
Well, they start camp on Friday, so I guess they had to get something figured out in the short term, which is why they put Urban on paid administrative leave yesterday. Certainly, there's a few weeks before they play a game. They don't play until September 1st. I think you'd want some clarity by then. But I honestly think you'd want some clarity. It's funny to use Urban's sort of benchmark, but he always says, 2 weeks before the season, you got to be ready to go. You got to know who's playing, and I would assume you'd want to know who's coaching. So they probably have 3 weeks, I would say, to get things in order before they really start worrying about where they go in terms of the football season.
Bill Landis of Cleveland.com joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, so now let's get into what you believe, because again, that's all we get to go on right now. And the three questions are: Is it believable, based on what the text that we saw from Brett McMurphy on this subject, that Urban's wife never told him what was going on in the text exchange between her and Courtney Smith?
Well, that's a difficult thing, because there's certainly, as far as I've read the report from Brett McMurphy and from what I have done digging up myself, there's no straight line to Urban that says he for a fact knew about this. I'm not saying I disagree with Courtney Smith. I'm just saying we don't have hard evidence of that just yet. But to your point, it is very difficult to believe that if Shelley Meyer knew about this, that she did not tell her husband. And Urban, at Big Ten Media Days, it's interesting talking about something completely unrelated. I don't even know why he was asked, but he was asked specifically about his relationship with Shelley and how she sort of helps him run things. And he made a joke about her, like talking about when to run the quarterback and when not to, but he got serious and he talked about how they share everything, how she's his greatest confidant. They've been partners, I believe, for 29 years, been married for 29 years. It doesn't seem like they keep anything from each other from the way he described it. So maybe in the end that could be a damning quote from him, because with what he said about his wife, it's very hard to believe that she would not have told him this if she knew it.
And it's just so, when you talk again about another man's wife or another woman's husband, when you talk about spouses, it just puts things on a completely different plane when you're talking about a job and who gets to stay in it or not. So it seems to me, Bill, you could tell me if I'm wrong, that in this investigation that Ohio State is doing, the ultimate witness here is going to be Urban Meyer's wife, to ask her point blank, did you tell him or not? And ask him point blank, did your wife tell you or not? And that's going to be whether or not Urban Meyer stays as head football coach at Ohio State. Am I missing something on that front?
No, I think I agree with that, with what we know at the moment. And it's not to paint Urban in the light of being victimized here in any way, but it does put him in a tough spot, that if that is the case and they can prove that she didn't tell him and they want to keep him as head coach, then he has to go up in front of America and put the blame on his wife. That's a difficult road to go down. So, which that's part of what leads me to believe that even if they can prove that Urban didn't know this, the PR of it all, I think could still lead to Ohio State making a coaching change, or Urban deciding to step aside, or something that ends with him not being the head coach, even if it is found out that he did not know about this.
And I ask this question with respect in the utmost ginger way. What's going on with the wrestling team? Does that add any extra, I guess, sensitivity to getting this right, if you will, Bill?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, Ohio State is dealing with a whole other monster with the rampant reports of sexual abuse by a former team doctor and wrestlers and other athletes. So they can't have two things blowing up in their face on the PR front. So yeah, they have to get both of them right, obviously. And they're investigating the doctor, and they say they're investigating Urban. But obviously, when you have two things going on at once, it puts much more pressure on you to make sure you get them both right and handle it the right way.
Well, Bill Landis here on the Rich Eisen Show, and in that press conference in the Big Ten Media Day, I mean, Bill, a colleague of yours asked point blank to Urban Meyer if his relationship with Earl Bruce and the Bruce family had anything to do with the way he was viewing Zach Smith on his coaching staff. And I'm wondering if you could lend any thoughts and perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it absolutely did. I'm sure on some level, whatever Urban knew, there's another layer to this relationship that goes beyond employer and employee. Urban's greatest mentor in coaching is Earl Bruce. Urban, I don't think, has ever made a move in his career without consulting Earl Bruce. Earl was always around the program until he passed away a few months ago. It's a very important person in Urban's life, probably second only to Urban's father in terms of the influence that he's had on Urban. And you're talking about that guy's grandson. So I think Urban certainly felt indebted to Earl to I don't know if protect is the right word, but to make sure things are done right by his family. And it's possible that clouded his judgment. He did admit that the relationship does extend to that area, but he also said that Zach Smith was hired because, one, he's a good coach. He played as a walk-on for Urban at Bowling Green. So maybe Urban would disagree with that, but I think it's pretty obvious that the relationship is a little different than the typical head coach, assistant coach.
So then let me ask you this, Bill, because, again, I came across Urban's path a handful of times at the draft. You know, we had a little bit of fun, or he was putting me a little bit on ice because he knows I'm a Michigan grad, and then we actually worked together on the air. And in the interim, all my colleagues who knew him at ESPN were like, he's a warm guy, he's a good guy, like you'd actually like him. And I'm like, I'd love to meet him. And then I worked with him on that one Friday night in Chicago when Ohio State broke the record for most players drafted in the first 3 rounds of a draft. And he was a brilliant, and he was happy, and he hands me his number saying, call the show whenever you want. And then he came on the show, Michigan Ohio State week, and you know, so I've got a chance to see who he is and what. Is it believable, though? Is it believable, based on you knowing him and everybody who knows him, that he would somehow hear this from his wife and protect Zach Smith because he doesn't want to hurt Earl Bruce? That and this is now blowing up in his face right now, is because that is essentially what is the storyline that is being implied by all the reporting that's out there right now, Bill.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to say this as a way of sounding accusatory, but I do think that there's been plenty of evidence over the years sort of about the depths people will stoop to protect college athletics, their football program, their personnel, their family, their friends. I would agree with you. My interactions with Urban have always been pleasant, and it's different probably for me than it was for you. I ask him questions, he gives answers, but he's always answered my questions. I've never had any sort of bad interaction with him, but I think you can still have lapses in judgment, even if you come off as generally a good person and a well-rounded person. I think everyone is prone to lapses in judgment. So if that's what happened here, I wouldn't be surprised by that. And we've seen other places the things that people do sometimes to protect, big-time college sports.
And then the last one for you then, Bill, the ultimate, if this is found out to be that Urban, because, let's just get with the a gray area, that they somehow still don't determine whether Urban knew expressly, although it's not terribly believable that he didn't. Is that something that they would want to part ways with Urban Meyer over in Columbus, do you think, Bill?
Yeah, well, I think that there are 3 end results here. 1, he stays as the head coach. 2, they outright fire him. 3, they come to some sort of financial agreement and sort of walk away from it. and I'm inclined to lean toward one of the two that ends with him not being the coach. I don't know if he'll get outright fired. I think that the language in his contract is still a little murky, and I'm not a Title IX expert. It looks to me like he possibly could have violated his contract, but I don't know that for a fact. But I think that murkiness combined with the PR hit that comes with this, how difficult it'll be to run the program moving forward, if he does come back, even if he's found to have not done anything wrong, it just seems to me like it'd be really difficult to move forward with business as usual. So I'm inclined to say that I don't think he'll be the head coach in whichever form that takes.
Wow. Okay. Jeez. So you think Urban Meyer has coached his last down at Ohio State, Bill?
I do, and I'm not saying I think this should be the case. It's
I
just
understand.
my hunch at the moment. I think yes.
Bill, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll chat soon. That's Bill Landis of Cleveland.com.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.